Hello, and welcome to my complete guide to Nasus. I'm the British Poro. I'm a master tier Nasus main in both solo queue and flex on the EU West server. I play a ton of Max Nasus with the occasional Q-Max game mixed in depending on matchups. I also stream educational Nasus games on an account that's ever climbing but currently sitting in D4 with D1 MMR. Before I start, I'd like to let you all know that all the resources used in this guide are publicly available, and you can find them in the description. So let's jump into it. Okay, so for Nasus's abilities, first off his passive. This just gives him flat lifesteal. It gives him increasing amounts at level 1, 7, and 13. So as the game goes on, he gets more and more lifesteal. It's not the best passive in the game, but it's pretty decent. It gives him sustain into hard matchups, and then in easy matchups it lets him use his health as a resource as well as his mana to trade with enemies. So you want to be taking really good trades with the passive. His Q is generally what his champion's designed around, but it's actually the spell that I utilize the least in a way. I think it's his weakest spell. So Siphoning Strike, it's an auto attack reset that every time it kills a unit, it gains permanent damage. It gains 3 damage for a regular unit, and for a champion, a cannon creep, or a big monster, it gains 12. So most of the time what you'll see Nasus players do is sit in lane stacking this and then try to be strong late game. But that's not how I play Nasus at all, and you'll see that. Wither, I think this is Nasus' best ability, sorry. Wither massively reduces the movement speed and attack speed of an enemy champion. It has 700 range and it's point and click. It's one of the lowest counterplay abilities in the game, and I really do think it's one of the best abilities in the game. If you drop this on an AD carry or any champion who doesn't have a dash, they're almost guaranteed to die, and specifically on AD carries, they just can't play the game because losing 75% of their attack speed and 95% of their movement speed stops AD carries being a champion. Who would have known? E, I think this is Nasus' second best ability, obviously, since I think Q is his worst and W is his best. It does a large amount of AoE magic damage, especially if you max it, and it reduces the armor of enemies inside it by a percentage. And that scales with how many points you put into it. So at level 1, it's 25%. At level 5, or like rank 5, sorry, not champion level 5, but ability level 5, it's 45% armor shred for everybody stood in your E. So between Wither making the enemy AD carry not a champion, and E reducing 45% of enemies' armor, I think Nasus is one of the most potent front-to-back tanks in the game. You drop your E on their front line, making them squishy. You drop your W on their back line, making them deal no damage. And your backline rips through their front line, while their backline can't kill you. And that's really, really potent. And then, into being this frontline tank, Nasus' ultimate causes him to ascend into a god. Nasus is a champion who, when he has his ultimate, he's twice as strong at least, compared to when he doesn't have it. He's extremely ultimate reliant. But what his ultimate does is it gives him a ton of health, a ton of resists. It gives him a storm around him that does percent health ticking damage to anyone anyone next to him. So tons of damage, and it also halves the cooldown of his Q while he's in his ult. So his Q, the stacking damage auto reset, he'll be throwing twice as many of these out while he's inside his ult. So yeah, that's Nasus' skills. So based on the game, I'm going to have a different max order for my skills, but 90% of the time I'm going to be maxing E first. This is your primary spell that you'll use in lane. Q is a bit of a one-point wonder. All that maxing it does is lower the cooldown and give it a tiny bit of base damage that is almost negligible. People like maxing it to get more stacks because it lowers the cooldown, but I really don't think it is necessary. I don't think the amount of stacks that you get is that much more. So yeah, E first, and then I'll go W second for team fights and objective fights. And even side laning, like W first just makes you win 1v1s a lot harder. So yeah, I'll normally go EWQ. But in some matchups, when E is pretty irrelevant in lane, like Gragas, he's just going to heal through your E. Like Cho'Gath, he's just going to heal through your E. In these cases, I'll max Q, then W, then E. I always want W maxed out second. It's the most impactful spell in mid to late game. So I'll always max this second. So I'm either doing EWQ or I'm doing QWE. 90% of the time I'm going EWQ. and I don't think you can go wrong with EWQ. You might just not get much done in lane, but that's the worst it's going to get with EWQ. With QWE, the worst it gets is that you're completely useless because you're putting all your eggs in the Q basket, but you're in a matchup where you can't farm. So in general, EWQ. But there's some matchups, and I'll talk about which, where you can go Qmax, and it's actually quite good. Now for runes. So most of the time on Nasus, you're going to be taking sorcery. In a lot of matchups, so it's already got it highlighted. That's interesting. In a lot of matchups, you're going to need Phase Rush. This rune will help Nasus get away from champions in the lane phase. Nasus' biggest weakness is that he has no mobility, so Phase Rush kind of covers that. Mana Flow Band you're always going to take, same with Transcendence. These have perfect synergy with Nasus. Mana Flow, he has extremely high mana costs, and you'll see when we get into itemization that there's some ways that I try to deal with this. And then Transcendence ability haste is just incredible on Nasus. By the time you get level 13 with Transcendence, with this haste shard, which we're always going to take, we can talk about that now, we're pretty much always going to take this haste shard. Transcendence, and then the haste that we buy from items, we're going to be able to permanently wither people, we're going to be spamming ease, we're going to have an extremely low cooldown on the Q, which is going to make use of all the stacks that we've gained in laning phase, and we're going to be able to be in our ult more often, which, like I said before, Nasus is an extremely ult-reliant champion, so haste really good on him. Now, Nasus doesn't really scale that well with AD or AP. His ratios aren't the best. He's mostly like a strong base damage champion. So Gathering Storm I often won't take, and I'll just take Scorch anyway. But in the lanes where Scorch is good, it's really good. So Scorch here. And then in the secondary tree, there are two setups that I'll take. One is in harder lanes, which is most of the time. So there you'll be dipping into Resolve. So for things like Darius, you'll be taking Bone Plating and Unflinching. Bone Plating helps you, basically anytime the enemy needs to all-in you, Bone Plating gives you windows where their all-in's going to do less damage. You don't want to be taking this into champions that can proc it easily though, like range champion. In that case, you're going to swap it for Second Wind, and Second Wind's just going to give you a bunch of extra sustain in the lane. And then Unflinching is almost always necessary on Nasus. This is where you get your tenacity from, but it also gives you slow resist. And on a champion with no dashes, slow resist is really, really nice. So Unflinching, almost always taken. If for some reason they have no CC and no slow resist, then it's perfectly fine to just grab Overgrowth. Overgrowth scales really well into the game. If you want to be like really aggressive, you could also take Demolish. But 99% of the time, you're going to be taking Unflinching, and then either Bone Plating or Second Wind. The other setup that I'll sometimes go is into champions that Nasus has a tough time to get on, or just needs to get on top of, like Kayle, like Kennen, although Second Wind is very good into Kennen, but into range champs that can't kill you, I'll take Biscuit and Approach Velocity. Biscuit just helps with the mana sustain in lane, we've talked about the mana issues already, but Approach Velocity, when you wither them, you'll get 15% move speed towards them. That is an insane amount of move speed, so this really helps with getting on top of people when you wither them. So this is something to consider. For the shards, I'll always take Adaptive Force. And then either Armor, Magic Resist, or Health. Armor in really hard physical damage lanes. Magic Resist into pretty much all magic damage lanes. You get more Magic Resist than Armor for some reason, so the Magic Resist one's just better. And then Scaling Health into any lane that I can easily get through. The Scaling Health actually outscales the Armor rune about level 7, I think, so yeah, the Scaling Health rune's a lot better. Right, as for some adjustments we'll go with the standard page for now. So the first adjustment is into things like Gangplank, where you bully them really hard, and also champions that you don't really need Phase Rush to get away from, like Riven or Wukong, that you can also bully in lane. I'll take Airy instead. This also works against Jax. Yeah, I like Airy a lot of the time, and I'll be going through every matchup and showing what rune setup I'll take and what items I'll build and stuff, but this is just a general overview. So this is another setup that I'll take. And then the final setup utilizes a completely different tree. This is something I'll take into tank matchups. I'll take this whenever I Qmax, and I'll take this into lanes like Camille when I Emax, things that want to do a big all-in fight, right? Camille wants to all-in with the ult. You'll go Lethal Tempo with Presence of Mind for the mana sustain. Tenacity, or if they have no CC, you can take Alacrity and get even more attack speed. Last Stand, this has really good synergy with Nasus because of his passive. And then I'll normally take these two runes because they're really good again, Mana Flow and Transcendence. Though sometimes, like against Kayle, I'll Q-Max often and I'll take Lethal Tempo. Against Kayle, I really like going Biscuit Velocity, or if you want to be really greedy, you can go Boots Velocity. And this will make you really easy to run her down. And the shards stay exactly the same. So that's Rune. Okay, so items. I'm going to be going over the items that you'll get in the laning phase. After laning phase, items are really dynamic, but I'll kind of show examples that you can get. But since I've said that 90% of the time I'm playing Max Nasus, I'm going to show my items for that. So I'm always going to start with Doran's Ring and 2 potions. Can you stack these? There you go. Yeah, so this is going to be starting items. The reason you go Doran's Ring is it gives AP, which is great. It turns your adaptive into AP, which works with your E. It gives health as well, and it gives mana regen. So this item's really, really good for Nasus. So this is what you're going to start with. Then on first back, here are some things you're looking for. First off, Dark Seal. Okay? The reason you go Dark Seal on first back is that with Dark Seal, Doran's Ring, and your champion at level 5, so you have 3 points in your E will fully clear the backline creeps on its own with 1 cast. This is a really nice breakpoint for crashing waves to bounce them back into you, or even just pushing to get a base. You know, all of these things are really, really nice, or pushing to get prio. So that's really nice. Another thing is the Mana Crystal. This is something that you very often pick up. If I have 700 gold, I'll probably buy Dark Seal Sapphire Crystal. This, like I said, Nasus has mana issues in lane, so this really helps, and there's a few things we can build this into later. And finally, boots are the other thing. So if I have 650 gold, I'll get Dark Seal boots. If I have, 1,000 gold, I'll get all 3 of these things. But Nasus having no mobility, movement speed is really important on him, and this helps with your spacing a lot. So yeah, these are like your first back items. After that, we're moving into like how you're starting to complete your items. So I'll call this early game. So these are your early game items. So you want your boots, your Mana Crystal, you can complete that into Glacial Buckler. And you also want to be picking up a Sheen. Where is Sheen? So Sheen is really, really good on Nasus. And these are your early game items. So the CDR boots, you almost always want these on Nasus. The Summoner Spell Haste helps you Ghost more often. The Ability Haste helps you Wither and E more often, and also get more stacks on your Q. The move speed, like we've said with the regular boots, even more move speed helps you space even more. And it lowers the cooldown of your teleport as well, which is like a nice, a nice little advantage. The Glacial Buckler. This turns your Mana Crystal into something useful that will actually build into a full item later. Into any AD champion in lane, this item is really good. It gives you armor, which is amazing for laning against AD champions. It gives you the mana, it gives you the same amount of mana as the crystal. And then it also gives you 10 more haste. And like we said, haste is really, really good on Nasus. And then Sheen. Sheen works perfectly with Nasus's Q. And this is going to build into our first item. But yeah, this is a core item on Nasus, the Sheen. Okay, so how are we going to complete these items? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to complete the Sheen. This is going to be our first thing into Trinity Force. So we'll put core build. We're going to complete the Sheen into Trinity Force. We're going to complete the Buckler into Frozen Heart. This is like what's going to happen if we're against AD, right? If we're against AP, we're actually going to be going for Abyssal Mask, and we're often going for Abyssal Mask third anyway. So at this point, you might be asking, well, what do you do into AP if... Because you don't want to be spending money to upgrade your Sapphire Crystal into a Glacial Buckler, right? That's a waste of 550 gold. You're getting armor. You don't want that. What do you spend that 550 gold on? And the answer is, I will just pick up a either a mantle or a full Negatron Cloak, and I will just sit on this. Negatron Cloak is 50 MR, for 900 gold. This item's really, really cost effective for one slot, and you can just sit on this in lane instead of your buckler. I'll still get the mana crystal a lot of the time because it really helps, but sometimes I also won't get this. But yeah, the Negatron Cloak's really effective into AP. So yeah, these are our core items. There's only one other change that I would make, and that is in some lanes, you're going to need anti-heal, right? If we think about Fiora, if we think about Irelia, these lanes, you really need anti-heal. So what's the best way to go about that? So for a while, I've been building Bramble, okay? I don't think Bramble's the best way to go about it anymore. I think what the actual best way to go about it is to swap this Dark Seal that you get early. You swap that for an Amp Tome, and then you complete this Amp Tome into Oblivion Orb, okay? So I'm gonna get rid of this Amp Tome, but I want anyone who's watching the guide to bear in mind that you would swap this Dark Seal for Amp Tome into the healing lanes, and then complete that into Oblivion Orb, and that's where you get your anti-heal from. So your build order into Irelia would look something like Doran's Ring, Pop Pop. First back, you'll get, instead of Mana Crystal and these, you'll get like Mana Crystal and the book, the Amp Tome. And then when you go back later, you might complete that into Oblivion Orb and Buckler, and then you'll get your CDR boots. Then you'll get your Sheen, and you'll finish that into Trinity Force. So yeah, something along those lines, but I think the Oblivion Orb is a lot better than the Bramble because it allows you to actually anti-heal people without them hitting you, which is really important. Irelia can just ignore you and Q the whole wave and heal back up to full. Whereas if you go Oblivion Orb, she can't do that. And you get your AP for the breakpoint anyway, like you would with Dark Seal. So yeah, that's laning phase itemization. Okay, so once you get out of laning phase, there's a lot of items to choose from. And I'm going to go over them one by one and make a little tier list for you. And that way you're going to know what I think of each item. So if they're not in the to be placed column, I wouldn't ever consider building them, and I never do build them. But these items we're going to talk about. So first off, Trinity Force. It's a perfect item for Nasus. It gives health, it gives AD, move speed on a proc, really useful stats. Haste, amazing. Attack speed, pretty good. But it gives a 200% base AD Sheen proc, which Nasus has really good base AD. And then it gives him more AD based on his base AD stacking up. Which again, he has really good base AD. So yeah, this is a perfect item for Nasus. You're going to build it pretty much every game. Another thing to bear in mind is that with Emax, your E armor shred will make your Trinity Force proc hit like a truck. So yeah, next up, Frozen Heart. This is another S tier item. Builds out of the buckler that you get in lane, so the build path is great. The buckler enables Emax. And then it just makes you really tanky. A ton of armor. It gives you mana, you'll never go home again. And then it gives you even more haste. Haste is like the best stat in the game on Nasus. And then the aura. If you have that and Wither, the enemy champs are not going to be able to auto attack. It's absolutely disgusting. So yeah, really good aura on Nasus. Perfect item. Another perfect item is Abyssal Mask. Now this is completely broken at the minute. In a teamfight, if you're stood next to 5 enemies, this item gives over 100 magic resist, and it costs 2,400 gold. It's absolutely bonkers. It also shreds the magic resist of enemies and gives you haste. So between Abyssal Mask and your E, you're now shredding armor and magic resist and making your entire team hit harder, and this is like part of why I think Nasus is so insanely good at front to back team fighting. You just buff your entire team, nerf theirs. Like, it's crazy. Medjai's. This item goes in A tier. We get a Dark Seal a lot, and sometimes it reaches 10 stacks, and when it does, you can upgrade it, get another set of mythic passive stats, because it's a legendary item, and a ton of AP, but more importantly, the move speed. Now, if you drop below 10 stacks, it's not worth having. But if you have 10 or more stacks, the movement speed is incredible to have. It's really, really nice. So yeah. Sunfire Cape. This item is like a B tier item. It's not the best armor item in the game. You're already getting a bunch of armor from Frozen Heart, so you don't really need armor. It doesn't give any haste, but the burn is quite nice in synergy with the Abyssal Mask. I just don't think it's very good as a 4th slot item, so that's why we're not going to really pick it up very often. So yeah. Radiant Virtue. This item makes you lose out on Trinity Force, so already it's losing a lot of points. The active effect when you pop your ult is good. It does synergize really well with what Nasus wants to do, being this front-to-back team fight tank juggernaut monster. Healing your allies as well is a nice addition, but I think it's going to have to go in C tier. I just don't think it's worth picking up, really. Spear of Shojin. This item is incredibly expensive and makes you very squishy, but it is very good. It gives you move speed, it gives you health, and it gives you a ton of haste. If you're really, really ahead on gold, I think it's a great item, but if you're not, I think it's too expensive to pick up. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to put it in B tier next to... I'm going to put it above Sunfire, but yeah, I'm going to put it here. Jack Show. Now this is a really interesting one. This item gives you the potential to get rid of Trinity Force and lose your damage to become the most monstrous tank in the game. Jack Show multiplies your ult resistances. A lot of the time you might be able to get away with taking conditioning as well, multiplying it even more. Maybe you get a Mountain Drake, pop your ult, Jack Show, Frozen Heart, Abyssal Mask. You are the king of tanks. And I think sometimes that's what you need. And when you need that, it's fucking incredible. But when you don't, you just go Trinity Force. I'm going to put it in A tier. I really like Jack Show. When it's good, it's amazing. So, yeah. If they have like a really low damage team, you can just go Jack Show and you will never die. Spirit Visage. I'd say this is like the equivalent of Sunfire, but for magic resist items. You know, it's just not really competitive. It doesn't give good enough stats. It does give you a bit of extra healing from your passive, but that's all it's really got going for it. If you've got like an enchanter or something, the value of this obviously goes up, but baseline, I'd say it's like a B tier item. Sterak's Gauge, C tier. No resists, no haste, just health and AD, and a shield, but the shield happens after you've already been hit, which is just a worse version of another item that I'll show later. So yeah, I'm really not a big fan of Sterak's Gauge. Randuin's Omen. This item goes in C tier as well. The reason for that is that you're almost always building Frozen Heart, and the passives overlap, and you'll be wasting gold if you buy Randuins. The reason it doesn't go in B tier is that sometimes they're going to have like a Yasuo and an AD carry, or a Graves and an AD carry. So they have two people critting you, right? In those circumstances, you can build like this and have Randuin's fourth, and the crit damage reduction is so good that it actually makes it worth it. But those times are so few and far between that Randuin's isn't really anything special, and it goes in C tier. Heartsteel. I've played with this because it was fun when it came out. It's a meme item. It goes in D tier. Morello. This is the completed version of your Oblivion Orb. The only time you ever get it is when you reach 6 items and you built an Oblivion Orb in lane. It's okay. Like, it's just okay. It goes in C tier. Like, you're gonna build it. You're gonna complete your Oblivion Orb. It's just free stats. But it's not the best item, really, for Nasus. But sometimes you need that anti-heal. Force of Nature. Sorry, I forgot the name of this item for a second. Force of Nature goes in A tier. This used to be an S tier item until it got nerfed. It used to make you almost immune to magic damage. Now it just makes you really, really tanky from magic damage. And it also gives you move speed, which is amazing. Move speed is great. So yeah, Force of Nature makes you really tanky. The magic damage champions gives you move speed. Awesome. Demonic Embrace. Now, this one, I want to put it... It's between B and A. I think it's around Shojin. So if their team comp is really tanky, you can go 4th item Demonic Embrace. After you make yourself tanky, you slam Demonic and you'll just start burning them with your E and your ult. But you only want to build it if they have a really tanky team. Otherwise, it's just not worth getting, and you should just get different items. But the item is pretty good. Death's Dance. This item has fallen from grace so hard. It used to be absolutely amazing on almost everyone. Now it's just a bad item on anyone that used to build it. So especially on Nasus, I think, yeah. Wait, does it even have haste anymore? I think it does have haste again now. If it doesn't have haste, it's D tier. If it does, then it can sit at like the bottom of C. Sunderer. This used to be really good into tanks. It's still good into tanks, but it got nerfed. I'm going to put it in B tier. It's just like a worse version of Trinity, to be honest. Like, Trinity's so good that there's no reason to ever go Sunderer. Iceborne Gauntlet. This also goes with Sunderer. It's, again, just a worse version of Trinity. If you want to be tanky, you want Jak'Sho. This doesn't make you anywhere nearly as tanky as Jak'Sho. The slow isn't really needed because you have Wither, so like what's the point of the slow? So yeah, I'm not sure why you would ever really build this. Everfrost. Everfrost is also a B tier item. Sometimes it can be really good, like there's some champs that struggle to deal with Everfrost, and building it into them with Emacs in lane gives you like a really nice early game spike, but you're gonna scale so much better with Trinity Force. But yeah, Everfrost is okay. It's okay. Fimbulwinter. This should be an amazing item. It gives mana and health, and then keeps giving you shields every time you wither people. Problem is, it's so undertuned that it sits in C tier, but the synergy of the item with Nasus is really good. It also it doesn't come online until you've stacked tier, but it's not a good late game item, so it's really weird. They need to buff this item, and then maybe it'll be good. Crown, also C tier. If you're playing like AP on your Emacs Nasus, then this can help you with some really hard lanes. I've tried it before. It's not the best. Legendaries though, A tier. Until the recent Trinity buffs. In fact, I'm debating putting this at the bottom of S. Yeah, I think I will. I'm going to put this at the bottom of S. Until the recent Triforce buffs, this was my go-to mythic on Nasus, especially into anything remotely beefy. And my build path was like, I was just rushing Legendaries and Eing people. And then I was doing these two items, the tanky items. So I was building Legendaries into tank, and then maybe getting like Demonic as well. Legendaries is really good. You'll do so much damage with this item. You don't have the same movement speed as when you go Trinity, but you also cannot go if you have a Legendaries and a Frozen Heart. It's physically impossible. So yeah, Legendaries, really good item. I love it. Stoneplate. I think this might be top of A. I'm debating putting it in S. It multiplies your resistances, which is incredible. Yeah, no, I think this goes in S, and I think I'm going to put Legendaries top of A, actually. I don't think Legendaries is as good as these items. But Stoneplate definitely is. And a lot of the time, this will be my 4-item build in-game. Like, I'll go Trinity, Frozen Heart, Abyssal, Stoneplate. Ton of resists, multiplies your resists, gives you an on-demand shield that scales with bonus health, which your ult gives you bonus health, so it makes your Stoneplate shield bigger. So you can run straight into a team fight, wither their carry, drop E on their front line so your carries do more damage. If they focus you, you pop Stoneplate, you can't die. Like, it's such a nice item. You see it a lot on Cassante as well for the same reasons. It multiplies his resists too, and he likes popping the shield, so yeah, really good item. Anathema's Chains. I think this might be the last S tier item. With Anathema's Chains, you literally permanently wither someone, and you take 30% less damage from them. It's generally going to be the AD carry. It gives haste and health. It's really cheap. It's a great item. Like, without the chains, with the amount of haste we get, Wither has a 5.7 second cooldown and lasts for 5 seconds. With the chains, you literally permanently wither them. They can't do anything. So if they have one fed member, you just pick up chains, you keep them withered. It's insane how good this item is. Dead Man's Plate. I'd say it's like the physical version of Force of Nature. It probably just goes in A tier. But I'm rarely going to pick it up because I've got Frozen Heart, which gives so much armor. So I'm probably just going to put it in top of B tier, actually. Hullbreaker. This goes in A tier. There's a time and a place for it. When it's good, it's great. When it's not good, it's useless. But because it's kind of like Jak'Sho. Like, when it's good, it's amazing. So, yeah, Hullbreaker, sometimes you need to split. Sometimes your only win condition is to split. And in those games, you go Hullbreaker, and it feels really nice. Guardian Angel. This is like a C tier item. The stats on it are bad. Ideally, you're not going to be dying anyway. Like, you're really hard to kill. So I don't know why you'd be going GA. The stopwatch that builds into it is nice, but there's something better you can do with stopwatch. You might see that in the to be placed column, so yeah. Serylda's, I think this is very much like Spear of Shojin, but it's worse, so I'm going to put it at the bottom of B. The thing with Serylda's is that no item in the game will make your Q hit harder. The armor pen on Serylda's makes your Q hit like a truck. It also gives haste, it lets your E AoE slow people, it gives you more AD. This item will make you hit really hard. But it has the same problem as Shojin. It's expensive and it doesn't make you any tankier. And Nasus wants to be tanky. That's what he's really good at. Thornmail. This item is a bit annoying. It's going in B tier. I think a completed Thornmail is better than a completed Morello. But the fact that you have to build Bramble and then they have to hit you still to proc your Grievous Wounds is so annoying. There's so many champions that can heal without hitting you. So, yeah, it's just a pain that, one, they removed the ability to CC people to proc it, but two, even if they didn't, Nasus can't do that anyway. So, yeah, Thornmail, the stats on it are really nice, much nicer than Morello stats, but, you know, it's awkward to proc, and for that reason it gets left behind in B tier, maybe even top of C, to be fair. Like, same tier as Morello, but a bit better, seems fair. Also in C tier, Titanic Hydra. You get a lot of health, it makes you do some damage. You don't need help with wave clear. It's just, I don't know, it's very underwhelming. I mean, it's better than Fimbulwinter, but yeah, it's probably around Death's Dance sort of area. Finally, Zhonya's. I really like this item. I think it's an A tier item. If they're like full AD, I think this is the best armor item outside of Frozen Heart in the game. Like, if you go Trinity, Frozen Heart, Zhonya's, I think that's really good. It works kind of similar to Stoneplate. It gives you an active that just makes you not die for 3 seconds. Stoneplate does that as well. If they're really trying to burst you, but you have a Stoneplate and a Zhonya's, they literally can't. There's also some key abilities in the game that Zhonya's lets you avoid. Like, recently I was playing against a Poppy, and every team fight she was trying to remove specifically me with her ult, right? I just Zhonya's it. And then I'm still in the team fight. So yeah, Zhonya's really, really good item. And that is the full list. I'm now going to talk a little bit about each matchup and how to deal with them, what items to build, what runes to run, things like that. This isn't going to be too in-depth, since I do also make matchup guides on my channel where I'll show a full game of how to play against each champion. And I'm slowly getting through those. But this will have chapters, so you can hover over the progress bar of this video and quickly find whatever matchup it is that you're playing against and see what setup I would go for and listen to me kind of talk about the matchup. So, jumping into the first one, starting out with a bang. Aatrox, as you can see, I've got the difficulty listed as Elite. This is a matchup where you're really just trying to survive. It's extremely difficult. You don't have any mobility to get out of his W, he can poke you with his Q for free. It's very much about wave control and making sure you can get the wave into a position where you're safe, and that's why I recommend Emax. Phase Rush can help you get away from him if he all-ins you, or if you proc it at the right time, it can help you get out of his W. And we're going for a very standard build. One thing to note is that I don't take anti-heal, primarily because I never expect to be able to kill him anyway. So it's just gold that I'm spending on anti-heal that's not going to help me in any case. I'm just going to build to be able to survive and clear the waves, and that's why the first completed item will be Frozen Heart. Bone Plating and Unflinching are a must. Unflinching actually allows Nasus to get out of Aatrox W if he takes the correct pathing, so Unflinching is very important. So yeah, this is the setup that I would take for Aatrox. Next up, we've got Akali. I've got this listed as an easy matchup, and the reason for that is that she can't deal with your Emax playstyle. She can't kill you if you build Magic Resist, and she can't sustain through your Emax. Your Emax, if she shrouds, you can just E it, you can be in your ult and just stand next to her and watch her burn away. She can never kill you, you can kill her, you're going to get an XP lead and a gold lead by pushing her out of lane, and you scale better than she does. So yeah, easy matchup. Now we have Akshan. I have this listed as a medium matchup. The reason it's medium and not easy is that unlike a lot of range matchups, he actually has a lot of kill pressure in lane. So you do have to be very careful. We're taking second wind to kind of mitigate some of that, help us sustain through it. And we're going to be going for a Frozen Heart Rush, which is not something that you often see. We're actually skipping Sheen in this matchup. The reason for that is that Akshan, with his multi-hit passive, is so hard countered by Warden's Mail and the Warden's Mail passive that goes into the Frozen Heart, that by buying it, you become unbelievably tanky against this guy, and then you can just get your Trinity Force second. So definitely prioritize getting a Warden's Mail straight after your cooldown boots and then completing that into Frozen Heart. You're going to become very tanky. In the mid game, he can't really deal with Wither. Like, the only thing he can do is E away, but if he's Eing out, he's not doing anything anyway, so you're practically taking him out of the fight. So yeah, really, really weak to Wither in the mid game. It's just a very strong early game and lane phase that you've got to be careful of. Camille. This is quite a fun matchup, and I've got its difficulty set as medium. You might notice a adaptation in the runes. We're taking lethal tempo here, and the reason for that is that we're playing Emax. You can see E first, we're doing Doran's Ring Darkseal as usual, and we're going to be getting a lot of poke off with that. While you're poking her, if she ever E's in on you with lethal tempo, you can just wither her and kill her. You just need to be ready for her to E in on you. The main thing is that if she's not going to E on you, you want to E on her. If you think she's going to E on you, you want to save your E and drop it on top of yourself so that you're fighting her in your E with the Armor Shred. But yeah, it's post 6 with lethal tempo. If she ever tries to all in you, you will just win. So that's why we take tempo in this matchup. Cho'Gath. This is an easy matchup, and you might notice this is the first Q-Max matchup that we get to. Cho'Gath, if you go Emax, he will just sustain through it with his passive, so it's pretty pointless. And since his champion is so weak in the lane phase, you don't actually need Emax to have the ability to have control over the wave. Like, you're so strong in comparison to him, especially after level 6, that you can just fight him over the wave. With lethal tempo, this is like the standard setup for Qmax that I run. You're gonna absolutely beat the shit out of him if he ever tries to fight you. You want to save your E to drop on top of him when you've got your tempo stacked and you're in your ult. You don't want to like waste E right at the start of the fight. You want to use it for maximum armor shred. That's basically the only reason you use your E with this build, is for the armor shred, since you're only going to have 1 point in it until level 14. But yeah, you should just be getting free stacks, maxing Q, farming up early cooldown boots, and then just smacking him for the rest of the game. Darius. Now this is a controversial one because it's one that I think is very easy, one of the easier matchups in the game, but a lot of people struggle with, and I think it's because they're too pigeonholed into the Q-Max Nasus way of playing the game. But for E-Max Nasus, as long as you use your E early to get the waves pushing into you, which you'll be able to see in my Darius matchup guide that I've made, once you start getting to level 7, level 8, level 9, especially level 10, this guy just can't play the game into you. You wither him, and he can't go on you. If he tries to go on you, if he pulls you in, you proc phase rush, you run away. If he flashes on you, you ghost and you run away. And he just, as the game goes on and on, you start dealing more and more damage with your Q stacks. You start getting more points in Wither. It just completely cripples his champion, and it just gets easier and easier until it feels like Darius can't win eventually. So yeah, I think this is an easy matchup. Dr. Mundo. This is another very easy matchup. It's very similar to Cho'Gath. We're building the same, we're Q-maxing. We're going lethal tempo. You'll notice that we're also taking the magic resist shard. That's quite important because his W deals magic damage, and his cleaver is going to be his main source of damage in the laning phase. And you're going to get enough base armor to get through his auto attacks anyway. So the magic resist shard ends up doing more work for us than the armor shard would. But yeah, Dr. Mundo, the only downside is that Nasus can't proc his passive, but he doesn't need to anyway. Wither completely cripples this champion. Especially once you get into team fights, Dr. Mundo trying to do anything while withered, he is literally just a punching bag for your team. Like, he can't get to anyone. Your backline will just kill him, and he doesn't do anything. Like, Mundo, his entire champion like auto attacks and runs at people. If he can't auto attack and he can't run, which is what Wither does, the champion doesn't do anything. So yeah, this is why I think it's such an easy matchup. Fiora. Now, this is probably the easiest of the hard matchups. I've got it rated as hard anyway. You're going to be picking up anti-heal, which means you're going to get that early amp tome instead of Darkseal, and then eventually complete that into Oblivion Orb. That's definitely necessary. The reason this is hard instead of medium is mainly for very high rank gameplay. A good Fiora, it's possible that they can predict or even react to like your character turning and parry your Wither. And if they ever parry your Wither, she will just kill you in the all-in. So you do have to be very careful about that. Oftentimes it's helpful to wait until she tries to parry like a Q, or maybe she tries to parry the active of your E, and then you can Wither her and then you can fight her. But you can poke her out once you've got anti-heal with Airy and Emax and Scorch. It's definitely winnable. It's nowhere near as hard as like Aatrox, that's why it doesn't bridge into Elite. I think it's barely even hard, but the potential for her to Wither, block your Wither with her parry definitely puts this one into hard rather than medium. Alright, GP matchup. This is one that's extremely easy if you Emax. He can't deal with your sustain. He doesn't have sustain, and you just blast him with Emax. Now, you might be thinking, he does have sustain, he has his orange, right? The problem with that is that if you're E-spamming him, getting him low, like if he's ever below half health and he oranges to heal, you just Wither and kill him. Even if he's under his tower, you just Wither him, run at him, and kill him. So him using his orange is pretty much always a mistake, so he effectively doesn't have sustain, but he also builds full squishy, and yeah, you just murder him with Emax. I've got a matchup guide for this, you can see it in action. You'll see how difficult it looks for GP. Definitely make sure to take Airy Scorch in this matchup, and yeah, should find it pretty easy. Garen matchup. So this one's actually quite similar in difficulty to Fiora, but I think this is medium. I think this is the top of medium and Fiora was the bottom of hard. So yeah, Garen is fairly difficult as medium matchups go. The main thing you have to watch out for is not using Wither until you've seen him use Q. He can't get on you without Q, so you can wait for him to Q and then Wither him, but if you weren't aware, Garen Q, when activated, removes all slows. So you don't want to Wither and then just have him Q it off, you'll have just wasted mana, and that's really not good. It's kind of like an easier version of Aatrox, where you can never really kill him. You need to Emax to use it to reset waves, but you'll be getting way more stacks in this matchup than you would against Aatrox, and you're just going to outscale him. So yeah, it's basically an easier version of Aatrox matchup. Alright, the Gnar matchup. This one's also medium. You're going to be trying to poke him out as you would with any ranged champion with your E. You're probably never going to get kill pressure on him. Maybe just after he comes out of Mega if he's sticking around too long and he's kind of low. But he is quite hard to kill. He's a ranged champion with a jump to escape, and then in Mega you can't really fight him until mid to late game, I would say. And even then he could just ult you away from him, so you don't want to be committing like Ghost or ult to try and run him down. But the main thing is that you'll get pretty easy stacks. You'll poke him out. You want to poke him out so that when he goes into Mega, he's not full HP and then he can't all in you. Because a full HP Mega Gnar is quite scary, but a low HP Mega Gnar is not too scary. And yeah, not a lot of kill pressure on either side. You kind of free farm your Q and poke him out with E. That's basically how the matchup goes. Gragas is a bit annoying. The reason for that is that his sustain is so powerful that it's never worth it to max E. This is getting nerfed, so maybe it'll get a bit easier, but since there's no point maxing E, you just go Q-max, and you can Q-max into him, you can sustain through his damage, but Gragas does actually do a fair bit of damage, so you have to be quite careful in this lane, and it's one of the harder Q-max lanes to play, so for that reason, I'm putting it in medium. The playstyle basically comes down to buy a Doran's Shield, try and get the waves bouncing into you as much as possible, and farm with your Q. And then once you've got enough stacks and you get your Abyssal Mask second item, you'll be destroying side lane against him, and he's going to have to try and find other ways to impact the game, like you know, grouping for team fights, but you're also quite strong as that as Nasus, so yeah, it's not the most difficult matchup, not the easiest either. Medium matchup. Okay, so for Gwen, she's basically the AP version of Camille. You're going to play in exactly the same way. You're going to play the Emax with lethal tempo. And the reason for that is that you're going to be poking her out with your E, and if she ever tries to dash on you, you can Wither her and just run at her and kill her. You do have to be careful if she's like landing one too many snips on you. You'll sort of, as you play the matchup, you'll learn where the all-in thresholds are. You don't want to be too low when you go in, because then she could kill you with her ult and her Q. But in general, you're poking her out, and if she tries to dash on you, you wither her and you run her down with your ult and your lethal tempo. So it's a medium matchup because compared to a lot of other champions that you're playing Max Nasus against, Gwen actually scales really well. So as the game goes later, it gets harder rather than easier, which is generally not what happens with Nasus, but with Gwen that is the case. So I've got this one listed as a medium matchup. Illaoi I've put as medium. Now it's a weird one because I think we should be winning as Nasus, but it's difficult to get used to. So one difficult component is that you have to be dodging her E, so learning how to use minions to like bait it, like walking in and out of minions, kind of like you would with a blitz hook to try and get him to throw it at you but then dodging it. Fake walking up for CS to see if she'll E you and then backing off. So dodging the E is one component. The other one is learning when you can kill her. Because if you judge it wrong and you go in when she's slightly too high on health, she can kill you with an ult all-in. But if you have enough damage to kill her, then, you know, you should be going in and killing her. So it takes a few tries of playing the lane to sort of figure that out. We're going to be swapping the Dark Seal for the Amp Tome to then build that into the Oblivion Orb. Anti-heal's really good against Illaoi. We don't need Phase Rush, we're going to take Aerie for more poke. We're trying to get her into those kill thresholds. And yeah, that's basically the matchup. Like I said, I think Nasus should be winning it. Wither's very powerful against her champion. She can't really interact with our E-poke. It's just about dodging the E and learning when you can kill her. Irelia is like Darius, but actually difficult. You will just win if you get to like level 10, level 11, level 12. But it's very, very difficult to get there. Unlike Darius, she can actually dash on you. She can also dash on minions. She has much better ability to control the wave. These are all things that you have to manage in the early game. So we're taking Phase Rush to stop her getting on us as easily. It also helps with dodging her E, and it lets you kind of run away through her ult. If she ever ults you and you proc Phase Rush, you will take the damage, but it lets you get out of range of her. You are going to be doing the Amp Tome into Oblivion Orb again. Obviously Irelia heals a lot and you want to mitigate that, and your goal in this matchup is to go down as little CS as possible and reach that level 10 to level 13 bracket. And at that point, if she tries to all-in you and you're not behind, you will win. Like, you'll wither her and you will just win. But it is difficult to get there, and that's why I've got this listed as a hard matchup. You want to be using the exact same principles that you see in the Darius matchup guide to play this one. Jax I've got listed as medium. Jax is medium because I think this is probably the best matchup in the game for learning and practicing spacing. Your E has slightly longer range than his Q, and if you can abuse that range with good spacing, you will demolish him with Aerie, with E max. Yeah, he just won't be able to touch you. Wither's really powerful against this champion as well. You'll also be able to wither him as he jumps in and then space out of his E and then walk back in after. So yeah, it's a mechanically difficult matchup to play. You have to have really good spacing, but it is favoured to Nasus if your mechanics and your spacing are good. So I really like the Jax matchup for like practicing and improving. Yeah, medium matchup. Now we've got Jayce. Now, after level 4, so level 5 onwards, with Aerie and Emax, you do just bully him with your E. And I think it's favoured to Nasus, but the thing that Jayce will probably do is take Phase Rush, and when you wither him, he will just Phase Rush away, which removes your kill pressure. If he doesn't have Phase Rush, then if he ever swaps out of Hammer, you just wither him and run on him, because then he can't swap back into Hammer and knock you away. And even if he does knock you away, Wither's so powerful that you can generally get back on him anyway. So yeah, it's a case of getting past level 4, then starting to abuse him with your E, and then looking for kill pressure. Sometimes he'll jump in on you and then knock you away, and then try and switch into Cannon and run away, and that's when you can wither him actually. But again, if he's got Phase Rush, his Phase Rush is going to be procced and you can't do it there. And in the cases where he has Phase Rush, it's kind of nothing happens and you scale kind of evenly, and yeah, that's why it's medium. It's kind of a very neutral matchup. K'Sante. This one's kind of like Illaoi. You've got to learn what his champion is capable of, and you've also got to get good at like dodging his Qs. But if you do that, I think again it's Nasus favoured. Your E is really potent against him. It actually shreds his armor, which makes him deal less damage as well as take more damage. So your E is really potent against him, and he doesn't have any innate sustain to get through your Emax. The one thing that you've got to bear in mind is when his E is available. Like any champion that has a shield, you want to monitor the cooldown of that, and if it's ever down, you can just throw an E straight at him, and you don't even have to like with champions with shields, I'll walk up like I'm going to E to see if I can get them to shield, because you can't really react to Nasus E. You kinda can, but you've also got to be like predicting it / ready for it, you know? So I'll try and fake it. Sometimes I'll use emotes to try and fake the shield out, but if he ever doesn't have the shield, you just throw your E at him and it's a ton of free damage that he can't really deal with. And scaling wise is pretty even. Ideally you actually want to be ahead in the K'Sante matchup, which I think you should be, but yeah, he does scale very well, as do you, so definitely a medium matchup. Karma. I've seen a lot of Karma top. This one's a easy matchup. You Q-max, you ignore her, you take approach velocity this time and biscuits to help you sustain through her poke, and you just wither her, run at her, and kill her. Legend Tenacity helps you with her root. Once her root's over, she is just dead. If you're ever on top of her, you will just smack her to death. They're generally building Enchanter Mythics, but sometimes they go like Frostfire. Even if they do go Frostfire, your E gives you Armor Pen, and you just whack away at her with your Q. Wither max second, so you can perma-wither her at 2 items and just chase her down forever. She has to bully you in laning phase, but she doesn't have enough damage to do it. So you just Q-max, scale for free, beat her up later. Yeah, really easy matchup. Kayle. Now this is the only matchup in the game you'll notice I have set to auto win as the difficulty. You Q-max for absolutely free. You'll be stacking every single minion, there's nothing she can do about it. You run her down with approach velocity with your Wither, just like you do with Karma. But unlike Karma, you ruin Kayle's entire game. Wither makes her not a champion for the whole game. She needs to auto-attack, she needs to move. She can't do either when she's withered. Kayle into Nasus loses lane, loses mid-game, and loses scaling. Because Wither just essentially removes her from the game. You just click one button on her and a champion doesn't do anything. Most Kayle players will ban Nasus. If you ever see a Nasus ban, it's likely a Kayle player. This is the easiest matchup in the game for Nasus, and it's not even close. Kennen. This is the traditional ranged matchup. His stun makes life a little bit more difficult than most, and that's why he's medium. But in general, you're poking him out with E, you're withering him, and you're smacking him in the face. You take Airy for more lane pressure. One thing to note in this matchup is that at level 2, if he's getting too aggressive on you, if he's like walking into your minions to try and deny you creeps and letting minions hit him, you can just take Wither instead of Siphoning Strike at level 2. You can Wither him, Ghost on him, and just E him in the face and start auto-attacking him. And that probably makes him flash away from you. And if he does, he's really susceptible to a jungle gank with Wither. A lot of the time, Kennens will get too big for their boots and start playing way too aggressive. And that's something you want to abuse in this matchup. But yeah, it's one of the harder range matchups because magic damage is harder to deal with than physical damage. You don't gain as much armor per like magic resist per level as armor per level, for example. And also he has stuns, which make it harder for you to chase him down and kill him. But yeah, medium matchup. Kled's a tricky one, and for that reason I've got him set as a hard matchup. It's similar to Irelia, he can dash on you. He also applies Grievous Wounds to you, which lowers your sustain. And he has a lot of kill pressure in lane, and your job is to survive. Similar to the Aatrox matchup, we never have any hope of killing him. In the Irelia matchup, you reach a point where you're going to kill her. In the Kled matchup, you don't. And because of that, we're rushing Frozen Heart after the Sheen. The problem is that you don't have enough damage to knock him off his mount and then kill him before he can get back on it. With a jungle gank, maybe, but you don't need a full Trinity Force if you've got your jungler with you. A Sheen is sufficient. So yeah, for that reason, we're just going straight into Frozen Heart. And we're trying to survive until eventually we get to that 2-3 item point where we're just so much more useful than Kled. And at that point, that's when we win the game. But getting there is the difficult part, and for that reason, it's a hard matchup. Malphite is another one of those easy Q-max matchups. You're just free stacking against him, he can't really stop you. Your E, even at just 1 point, a 25% armor shred is really good against Malphite. It's going to be getting a lot of value, and you just free stack, you ignore him, you become a monster in the side lane, and it's very difficult for him to deal with you. Even if he brings a jungler and ults on you, a lot of the time you can 1v2 because his champion's so weak. Lethal tempo, as always with Q-Stack. Really helps with those all-ins that you're going to be looking for as a Q-Stack sort of lane-winning Nasus. Yeah, easy matchup. Not a lot Malphite can do. Mordekaiser is very comparable to Gragas, where his sustain makes it so that there's not a great deal of point in you Emaxing into him. You're never going to poke him out. So you Q-Max, but it's actually quite a difficult lane to get through with Q-Max. The one thing that you can do is force him to Q you and your creeps. If he wants to Q you, you want to make him Q your creeps as well, and that's going to bring the wave into you so that you can Q stack and get more stacks. And eventually, you need to sort of feel it out, and when you feel like you've got enough stacks to kill him, that's when you can go for the all-ins. You can go and attack him. One thing that you don't want to do is, if you can avoid it, you don't want to ult first. You want him to ult you, because his ult steals 10% of all stats. You don't want to give him 10% of your ult stats, you want them all to yourself. So you want him to ult you, and then you want to ult, and you want to get all those stats and not give him any. But yeah, it's a pretty hard matchup to Q stack into, but if you do, you'll start winning eventually. There's not too much to say about this one. You can see it in the difficulty section. I have it listed as permaban. This is what I ban when I play Nasus. He will destroy you in lane. He will keep you slowed, he'll shred your armor, he'll deal true damage to you, he will ignore your wither by becoming CC immune, you can't get him off you, he'll chase you into Narnia, he'll not let you stack, he has sustain so you can't even Emax. It's just doomed. Like, I don't think there's any way you can win against Olaf, and so I just ban it. Ornn, I think, is probably the easiest tank matchup in the game, or one of them. It's kind of similar to Sion, which we haven't seen yet, but their spells, if they want to use them on you, also will hit the wave if you stand in the wave, and that will cause the wave to push into you, and you'll get free stacks under your turret, and you can never be ganked. So for Q-Max Nasus, Ornn is really easy. He can't kill you, you're getting free stacks, you're becoming a monster, and eventually you'll just start beating him down so hard that he can't really do anything about it. So I think Ornn's a pretty free matchup. Not as free as something like Kayle, but as easy matchups go, this is a very easy one to deal with. Pantheon I've got as medium, which might seem odd because you would expect Pantheon to destroy Nasus, like Pantheon is so good early, and he is. It's very similar to the Irelia and Kled matchups where your only job is to survive. But the thing with Pantheon is that you only need to do this job of surviving until level 6. Once you get level 6, if he W's in on you, you wither him, you pop your ult, and you just beat him down. It's an Emax lane. The Emax helps you get through the early game. Phase rush doesn't really help you. Like, by the time he's done his combo, he's going to want to leave anyway, so phase rushing out doesn't do anything, so we're just going to take Aerie for some more damage. And yeah, you could potentially go for the lethal tempo setup, but I think Aerie just helps you get to that point where you're beating him, and once you're there, you don't need lethal tempo anyway. So yeah, medium matchup, hard early, make it to level 6, and you'll be winning. Poppy is another champion that I've got as medium. You're going to be Emaxing, you're going to be trying to bully her out, shred her armor, and then start killing her once you've got Triforce. Once you've got Triforce, you're going to be absolutely destroying her in the side lane. The reason I've got her as a medium matchup is nothing really to do with lane. The only dynamics there are that you don't want to E her when she's got her shield up, you don't want to stand near walls, you don't want to unnecessarily walk into queues, and we're taking second wind to heal. But it's a medium matchup because once we get into team fights, her ult is actually really, really good against Nasus. Like, Nasus wants to get in there and start causing chaos and pop his ult and wither people and E-shred. Poppy can just get rid of him. She just yeets him back to his nexus. So one thing that I do in this matchup is I build Zhonya's. I build Zhonya's 3rd item, 4th item if I need some magic resist, but I'd normally just get a Negatron and then get Zhonya's because I'm going to need the stopwatch effect. The reason I'm going to need it is that when she starts spinning that hammer around, as she's about to throw it, I'm going to Zhonya's. And she's not going to knock me away. Now I am going to be out of the fight for 3 seconds. But that's unavoidable. It's much better than being out of the fight completely. So yeah, you need Zhonya's in this matchup, and it's medium for that reason. Gwyn's a nice easy matchup after all these. It seems like we've had a few medium ones in a row. Gwyn's a nice easy one. You just Emax, throw your E on her, nothing she can do to avoid the poke. If she ever E's on you, you wither her and you run her down, and level 6 onwards, you have an ultimate and she doesn't, and you'll just smack her around. Yeah, Quinn's a really easy matchup for Nasus. I wouldn't want to be playing Quinn in this one. Renekton's medium. The early game's pretty difficult, but it's not as bad as some of these other champions. He can dash on you, and he can deal some damage, but with good wave control, you can easily get through it. Kind of like a harder version of Darius, because he doesn't fall off as hard in comparison based on Wither not affecting him as badly. Spacing's really important. You want to be getting out of the way of his Q as much as possible, because he's going to try and use his Q to mitigate the poke that you're applying to him with your E. So you want to try and get out of the way of his Q as much as you can. Don't let him get on you and Q you, especially don't let him empowered Q you, because that's going to heal him a bunch, and just negate a load of the poke that you're putting down on him. If he gets low enough, you can kill him. If he plays badly and lets you poke him too much, then yeah, there's windows to kill, and because of that, it's a medium matchup. Rengar's really hard, and I think this one's borderline elite. We're E-maxing out of necessity. If you try to Q-max and farm against a Rengar, he will just murder you. There's two things that make this really hard. One is that he can remove your Wither with his cleanse, and that's not very nice. And the other one is that he has a ton of sustain with his W. Since all of your damage comes in big bursts, like a big chunky Q or a big chunky E, you can always double W that. So we're going to be getting Oblivion Orb in this lane. We're going to swap the Dark Seal for the Amp Tome, and then we're going to get an Oblivion Orb. Once we get Trinity Force, you can kind of hold out on Wither and fight him until he has to use his Ferocity, and then you can Wither him and try and kill him. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult matchup to survive in early, and you got to be pretty good to win this one. I love this matchup, man. I used to be a Riven one-trick. I have over 1 million mastery points on Riven. I've been destroyed by enough Nasuses to be happy to finally have it the other way around. Once Nasus gets level 6 and gets some armor, Riven can never kill him again for the rest of the game. As long as you don't get cheesed early with Ignite, you just win. Emax, as long as she doesn't E your E, you will destroy her. As long as she doesn't snowball, you just guaranteed win. It's really easy for Nasus. She just can't kill you after level 6. Rumble's pretty hard, and got even harder with the latest patch where they gave him % damage on his Q. If you can dodge his E, it's extremely effective. He has huge magic resist shred on his E. You don't want to be getting hit by those if at all possible. We're taking lethal tempo with the Emax. We're trying not to E into his shield, just like Riven, the last one we talked about. If we can poke him down a little bit, if he tries to go on us by Eing us and throwing his flame spitter at us, we wither him, we ghost on him, we ult, and we start slapping him with lethal tempo. It's kind of like a harder version of Gwen. The lane's really difficult and the all-ins are hard. But unlike Gwen, you start to massively outscale him as the game goes on, so you have that going for you at least. Sedge isn't a champion you see too often anymore, but she's actually quite a lane bully of a tank when she is played in top lane. We're going to go Emax to help us get through the lane. She has no sustain, so we can start to poke her out with Emax, and shredding her armor is extremely valuable. We're taking Bone Plating because her bully ability sort of comes in the form of all-ins, and we're taking the Armor Shard. This is really important. Her W does a lot of physical damage, and she'll be auto-attacking a lot early, so in lane she's going to deal a lot of physical damage, and it'll shift more towards magic as the game goes on. But yeah, you want to be taking the Armor Shard for this matchup. It plays kind of similar to maybe like an Irelia or something, where she's trying to get on you and chunk you out, and you're just trying to not, you know, fall over early, and you'll be pretty happy as the game goes on. You'll start to beat her pretty quickly. That's hard. That's basically all there is to say. He does a ton of damage, he can pull you in, so you need phase rush for that, just like Darius. But you don't outscale him as hard as you outscale Darius, because his true damage scales really well into the game, and he can ult you out of their team in fights. And yeah, so that's a bit of a nightmare. He also heals through your poke, which Darius doesn't do because he uses his passive. It is just a much harder version of Darius. You're going to play it like the Aatrox lane, so if you watch my matchup guide for that, those concepts will apply to set. Using your E to get the wave where you want it, and using that to help you survive and scale. And yeah, it's a matchup where you're just going to scale and try to have as much impact on the game as you can. Very difficult matchup. Not quite elite levels of difficult. Like Aatrox kills you way easier than Set does. Set actually has to run up to you and get in range, whereas Aatrox QE range is like 1,000, so yeah, still very hard. Shen's a medium matchup. The lane phase is pretty hard, and we're going to be Q-maxing, so you have to navigate that quite well. He is very strong in the early laning phase. We're going to hope that he needs to ult away to help his team. If he does, we're going to be building Trinity Force, we're going to be building Hullbreaker, we're going to have a ton of stacks, we're going to do massive damage to his turrets when he leaves. If his team is winning without him, it's pretty doomed, because he's just going to sit in lane. His W makes it so that you can't Q him. His E makes it so that you can't take turret in his face like you can against a lot of tanks, because he'll taunt you into the turret. So yeah, if he doesn't need to ult to help his team, it's going to be really annoying. But if he does, you can push it in, make it so that he's losing waves and turrets when he does ult away, and then you're really good. So yeah, I'm calling this one a medium matchup. For the Singed matchup, you basically just ignore him and stack your Q. He's not going to do too much. The only thing you really need to bear in mind is that when he goes to proxy, a lot of the time, because you have your passive lifesteal for sustain, you can just walk into the wave and not let it hit your turret. And you can basically, not proxy, but, you know, tank the minions and stack, and that will stop them dying to your turret, which will mean you get more stacks, because your Q, you can just let it keep coming off cooldown and finish stacking every single creep. So if he tries to proxy against you, you're going to get a billion stacks, and then you're just going to take over the game. If he ever tries to fight you, Wither's really effective against this champion, and you can just beat him down with lethal tempo. Sion is very similar to what I said about Ornn before. If he wants to Q you to damage you, you can stand in the wave and force him to push as well. And by pushing, it will make it so that you can't be ganked, and you just freely stack up your Q, collect your minions under the tower, and you'll just scale for free. Sion does scale pretty well, as does Ornn, but Nasus Q-Max scales harder. You just start absolutely ripping through him once you've got your ultimate. You can force him to ult away a lot of the time, and then you just free stack. Yeah, it's a really easy matchup. He can't really do much to you. Teemo is really easy. He can't survive your E-poke very well. He has no sustain. You can just build magic resist and survive through his poke with second wind, and you can just wither him and run him down once you get enough stacks. So it's not a very difficult matchup. As the range matchups go, it's one of the easier ones in the game. All you have to be wary about is not trying to Q into his blind, but since we're going Emax, his blind doesn't really counter us that hard. It doesn't stop our E doing anything, it only stops our Q. So yeah, pretty easy matchup as far as things go. Trundle, this is another one that I already have a matchup guide for. We're Emaxing, we're trying to bully him. He does have a lot of sustain, but we can get things done in the lane. Wither is very, very effective against him. Like Mordekaiser, we don't want to ult before he does, because then he'll steal even more resists from us. We want to be using it after he ults if possible. And we take phase rush, but we try not to proc it. We only want to proc it when he uses his pillar, because the only time he ever has kill pressure on us is when he pillars. So if we just phase rush as he drops the pillar, we can run straight over the slow zone and just get out. So yeah, that's why we take phase rush. Don't want to accidentally put that on cooldown. We want to be using that for the pillar specifically. Don't ult into his ult, and it should be a fairly playable matchup. He does stat check you a bit. You don't want to fight him early, but yeah, that's basically how it goes. Alright, here's another champion that's completely countered by Wither, and he has sustain for your E-poke. So what I do in this lane is I'll put 3 points in E early until level 5. This gives me control over the wave. And from there, I'll just max Wither. If you max Wither, lethal tempo, Trinity Force. If he ever spins on you, you just Wither him and kill him. He'll ult, but he can't kill you fast enough because your Wither removes 75% attack speed. So yeah, you kind of just stat check him. It's a really easy matchup if you go 5 points Wither early. You do need the 3 points in E. Don't skip that. You're not going to have any control over the wave if you don't do that. But after that, 5 points Wither and you'll just stat check him. It's really easy. Urgot's a medium matchup. He's really good at setting up ganks, but mainly there's just one really key thing that you have to play around, just like the Illaoi matchup. And just like the Illaoi matchup, it's also on E. If he hits his E on you, you're probably dead. But it's kind of hard for him to hit his E on you. And you're just going to be poking him out with your E. Max Nasus does a lot of damage to Urgot, who has not a lot of sustain. He can go Cull and W things, which gives him more sustain, but yeah, you'll just beat him, you'll get stacks pretty much for free. As long as you don't get hit by his E, you'll win. You can bait the E, and if you manage to like backstep it and then wither him, you can all-in him and kill him. It's a pretty... I don't want to say easy lane, it's like bottom of medium I think, but I think you should be winning. Vayne top's really annoying. You can poke her out with your E, but she'll do more damage to you than you do to her. You can't ever really kill her 1v1, even with Wither, but one thing that you bring to the table as Nasus into Vayne top is amazing gank setup for your jungler. So as long as you let your jungler know, listen, if I Wither her, she can only condemn one of us, right? So if I Wither her, it's almost a free kill, and that's why it's a medium matchup rather than a hard one. If there were no junglers in the game, it would be a hard matchup, but there are, and that's kind of the weakness of Vayne top, so this makes it a medium matchup, in my opinion. Volibear I've got as an easy matchup. It's very similar to Darius. Once you get points in your Wither, you can just start ignoring him. The problem that Volibear has when compared to Darius is that his passive forces him to shove the lane. So a lot of what you have to do with wave control into Darius, he does it for you because of his passive. He can't really freeze on you. If he ever trades with you, he's going to be pushing the lane. His passive pushes the lane. You just have to ignore him and try not to take any trades at all, because if you lose health... I don't know why I said that so weird. If you lose health, he can orchestrate a dive with his jungler using his ult to disable your tower. But once you get points in Wither, you can kind of just Wither him and ignore him. So yeah, it's a pretty easy matchup. Warwick is the only other champion apart from Aatrox that I have in Elite tier. This champion, I mean, you just have to Emax and build anti-heal and just try to get through the lane. If you can get through the lane, you're actually pretty good into him as the game goes on, because you can Wither him and all the stuff that he wants to do. He doesn't scale very well, and he scales even less well when he's withered, but he can just freeze the lane, heal, even with Grievous Wounds, you can just heal through all your poke and just keep the lane perma-frozen. And you can just never walk up, you can never get farm. If he ever ults you, you just die. I don't know, this champ is so hard to play against, it's so disgusting in lane. He'll just run around the map and kill your team if he ever, like, pushes. Yeah, it's really hard. I honestly don't know how you're meant to win. You're probably just not meant to win. Like, you just hope you don't queue into it, because you're banning Olaf. I think this is the hardest matchup in the game outside of Olaf. I think it's even harder than Aatrox. You just hope you don't queue into this. It's less popular than Olaf, so you don't ban it, but if you run into like 2 or 3 of them in a row, then you could start banning Warwick instead of Aatrox, I guess. Wukong's a pretty hard matchup. It's like Irelia. I'd put this at the bottom of hard though, not towards the top. Your Emax is pretty effective against him with Airy. You can poke him out and you can find solo kills, but he does kind of just stat check you down, and once he's got Sunderer, he's in that awkward territory of like, anti-heal's not really worth it, but he does heal through a lot of your damage. His passive also gives him a lot of sustain, and his dash range is quite long. His Q range is long, so if you're just walking up for CS, you're going to get Q'd. It's a bit of an awkward one, but you just play your normal Emax playstyle, and it's definitely winnable. It's just harder than most matchups. Getting near the end now, the Yasuo matchup's really easy. You bully him really hard with your E, especially since the item changes now that he no longer goes lifesteal first item. So yeah, you bully him out with your E. If he dashes on you, you wither him and you start beating him down. His Q cooldown's lowered by your wither, so he can't really do much, and you just stat check him once you reach level 6. Like Riven, he can kind of cheese you early if he's running Ignite, so you've got to be careful of that. But as soon as you're level 6, it's really hard for him to do anything into you. And Wither just makes him so much weaker. So yeah, it's a pretty easy matchup for Nasus. Now, Yone, on the other hand, is hard, which is weird because he's a similar champion to Yasuo, but here's why it's hard. He can use his W on demand to block your E-poke. He stat checks you a lot harder because he has physical magic and true damage, so he's a lot harder to build against than Yasuo, who against him you just stack armor. He also engages with his E, allowing him to trade with you, and then when you try to wither him, E him, and hit him inside your E, he just pops back to his shadow, and you don't actually get to return the trade. And then he has a lot less conditional ways of engaging on you if he's going for a gank setup. Like, him just ulting you is a lot easier than Yasuo trying to land a tornado and then ult you, or Yasuo being reliant on someone setting him up and then ulting you. So yeah, Yone is a lot harder than Yasuo and is actually quite a hard matchup for Nasus. Yorik's a really easy matchup. You just E-poke him down, not too much you can do about it. The only thing you have to worry about is getting trapped in the cage. Even if you do, you can kind of just ult and fight him, but you can't do that every time. You do want to dodge the cage if possible. When it's low level, you can just auto-Q it to get out, but once he starts getting more points in it, it gets more difficult. You can stack his ghouls. 3 stacks. Nice. Yeah, you can heal off his ghouls. You have more than enough sustain to deal with him. Like, if he lands a couple of E's on you and gets some ghouls on you, it's fine. You can kind of just ignore him, poke him out with your E, stack your Q. Really easy lane. And finally we've got Zac. This is an easy lane like Ornn or Sion, where if he wants to trade with you, he has to hit the wave because you stand on top of your creeps, and then if he E's in and W's, he's going to be pushing into you, and he can't deal enough damage to you that once the wave crashes after he pushes and you start hitting the creeps under your tower, he can't do enough damage to make up for the sustain that you have, especially once you start getting some stacks in your Q. So Q max, lethal tempo, once you've got enough stacks, you start beating him down and killing him. Really easy matchup. So that concludes the guide. I hope you enjoyed. If anyone watched it all the way through, you're an absolute beast. I hope you all learned something from this, and yeah, feel free to pop back whenever you like, look at specific matchups, look at runes and setups and stuff, and good luck in your games. See you later, guys.